Hi, everyone. Today we're going to look at Luke 16. And this first parable, Jesus talks about this steward, this manager, who had really a lot of control, almost complete control of his owner's finances and wealth. And Jesus tells us that this manager is embezzling. He's taking money from his master. And we know that he must be guilty because when he's confronted with his embezzling by his boss, this owner, he doesn't try to defend himself. So to secure his future, he falsifies, he lowers the amount that a lot of his master's debtors owe. And he did it in front of them so they would know that he did this great thing for them. And so when he got kicked out of his job, they would remember him, give him money or something. But what I believe this parable is really, what I think Jesus' main message here is that the world outside of the church seems to be a lot more eager and uses more ingenuity in trying to gain wealth, money, and possessions than we Christians do in trying to spread the kingdom of God or trying to win souls. And so he's just encouraging us to try to have that same kind of fervor that people have to gain money, to have that same kind of fervor to bring people into the kingdom. In verse 10 and 11, we have a very famous saying of Jesus, and that is, he was faithful in little, will be faithful in much, and he was unrighteous in little, will be unrighteous in much. But this whole idea of being faithful in a little, be faithful in much, is really a universal principle. If you work hard at whatever level you find yourself, you're going to be awarded, usually promoted to more responsibility. And Jesus just takes this principle and applies it to the kingdom of God. It's like Zechariah said, do not despise a small beginning. But you're faithful here, God will move you. We used to have a speaker here come at Future Quest, and then we had him at the church. His name was Bill Wilson. And he used to say that if you want to know what where you need to be working in the church, just look around and see where there's a need. He used to say the need is the call. God doesn't have to speak to you directly. If you see there's a need, fill it. And as you fill that need and are responsible and work as God has called you, God is going to promote you. And that's really what Jesus is saying here. Then Jesus addresses the Pharisees' obsession with wealth and money. They believed that wealth was a sign of God's favor, that God gave money to the righteous Jew. And if you were poor, you weren't as good as a wealthy person, and more of God, you had less of God's favor. God loved you less, in other words. And Jesus tells the Pharisees that kind of thinking is an abomination to God. In verse 16 and 17, I just want to read it to you. It says here, Jesus says, the law and the prophets were proclaimed until John the Baptist. Since that time, the gospel of the kingdom has been preached and everyone is forcing his way into it. It is easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one stroke of a letter of the law to fail. Now, people have been arguing, debating, I guess the word is, what did Jesus mean when he's saying people are forcing their way into the kingdom? Well, I believe Jesus is saying a couple things here. Before Jesus came, before John the Baptist came, the law and the prophets were the final word. But now Jesus has come. And Jesus came to fulfill the law. And a lot of the Jewish interpretations, the law and the prophets, the traditions that came out of that were actually keeping people from God. But now Jesus had come, and he'd shared a new way of understanding the Old Testament about the Messiah and coming into a relationship with God. And a lot of the people that these religious leaders were identifying as undesirable, not worthy of coming to know God. They were pushing their way past all these interpretations, past all these traditions, and they were coming to know Jesus. And then Jesus said, and even though I'm saying this, in no way am I avoiding what the Old Testament writers reveal to us about God. Those are all true. In verse 18, Jesus talks about the accepted, thinking on divorce. And it was that you could literally divorce your wife for just about anything. If she wasn't a good cook, you could divorce her. As long as you went through the prescribed legal steps, you got a certificate of divorce, and then you released your wife, and you were free to go marry someone else. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus made it very clear that the only reason why you could divorce your spouse was because of adultery. The Apostle Paul adds another one, and that was desertion in 1 Corinthians. If you're married to someone and you become a Christian, for example, and they say, I don't have anything to do with you, and they leave you, desert you, you are free in that situation as well. We believe there's also a third, and that is if they used to kill you for it, stone you for it in the Old Testament. For example, sorcery. That's drug addiction. Alcoholism. God doesn't expect you to remain married to a drug addict, for example. Anyway, bottom line here is Jesus is saying generally, divorce is wrong. And then he adds something where he says that if you're married to Sue and you meet Gail over here and you decide, you know what, I'd be happier with Gail. So you go through the legal process and you divorce Sue so you can marry Gail. God isn't mocked. God's not fooled by a piece of paper. You've committed adultery. All right? In verse 19, we have the last parable here in Luke chapter 16, and it's about a rich man and a poor man named Lazarus. Now, because this parable deals with a lot concerning eternity, I think we have to be careful about how much we press the details of this story because it's a parable, right? But this parable does give us some indications about what happens after death. And one is that there seems to be consciousness after death. And since that's true, it puts into question the theology of soul sleep, which is the theology that if you're not a Christian and you die, you don't have any consciousness until the resurrection. This parable talks about eternal torment, that there's no communication with the dead, that there's no second chance after death. But I really think the main message here that Jesus is trying to communicate to us through this parable is that we're not supposed to ignore people who are suffering. This rich man's main sin was not what he did, but it was what he did not do. He walked over Lazarus, passed him every day of his life, and this guy needed help. Lazarus just became part of the landscape. It's just part of the world. This poor guy, he basically wasn't even worth helping. And that really challenges me, that God expects you and I to have compassion on the poor. God expects you and I to have compassion on the poor. God bless you guys. Have a great day.